to each and every one of you. Every Christian suffers from depression from time to time. Sometimes depression is self-induced because it is caused by sin. Sometimes depression comes through no fault of our own. There may be severe problems which are imposed by outside circumstances. There may be physical exhaustion and a weakening of physical and emotional strength. There may be serious disturbances or distress in life with a feeling of being trapped or fear of what might happen. One of the major difficulties in facing the challenge of anxiety and depression is that they can affect every part of a Christian's life. So let's talk about depression and try to understand what it means. So what is depression? We all go through ups and downs in our mood. Sadness is a normal reaction to life's struggles, setbacks, and disappointments. Many people use the word depression to explain these kinds of feelings, but depression is much more than just sadness. Some people describe depression as living in a black hole or having a feeling of impending doom. However, some depressed people don't feel sad at all. Instead, they feel lifeless, empty, and apathetic. How depression affects a person's life. Depression affects all aspects of a person's life. It impairs our ability to sleep, eat, work, and get along with others. It damages our self-esteem, self-confidence, and our ability to accomplish everyday tasks. People who are depressed find daily tasks to be a significant struggle. They tire easily yet cannot get a good night's sleep. They have no motivation and lose interest in activities that were once enjoyable. Depression is more than just an ordinary sadness. Sadness is a part of being a human, a natural reaction to painful circumstances. All of us will experience sadness at some point in our lives. Depression, however, is a physical illness with many more symptoms than an unhappy mood. Depression doesn't always have a reason. Sometimes people become depressed for what seems like a good reason. Maybe they lost their job or a close friend passed away. But with clinical depression, there doesn't necessarily have to be a reason for how you feel. Chemicals in the brain which are responsible for mood control are out of balance and you may feel bad even though everything in your life is going well. Children are not immune to depression. A myth exists that says childhood is a joyful, carefree time in our lives. While children don't experience the same problems that adults do, like work-related stress or financial pressure, this doesn't mean that they cannot become depressed. Childhood brings its own unique set of stresses such as bullying and the struggle for peer acceptance. Depression is a real illness. You are not weak or crazy. Depression is a real illness which is caused by chemical imbalance within your brain. Depression is treatable. You do not need to suffer if you have depression. There are several treatment options available to you, including medications and psychotherapy. Signs and symptoms of depression. Depression varies from person to person, but there are some common signs and symptoms. It's important to remember that these symptoms can be a part of life's normal lows. But the more symptoms you have, the stronger they are, and the longer they lasted, the more likely it is that you're dealing with depression. When these symptoms are overwhelming and disabling, that's when it's time to seek help. There are some common signs and symptoms of depression. Feeling of helplessness and hopelessness, loss of interest in daily activities, appetite or weight changes, sleep changes, irritability or restlessness, loss of energy, self-loathing, concentration problems, and unexplained aches and pains. So what causes depression? Unfortunately, it is not fully known what causes clinical depression for a particular individual. There are many theories about causes such as biological and genetic factors, environmental influences, and childhood or developmental events. However, it is generally believed that clinical depression is most often caused by the influence of more than just one or two factors. For instance, A person whose mother had recurrent major depression may have inherited a vulnerability to developing clinical depression. That's genetic influence. This combined with how the person thinks about himself or herself, that's psychological influence, in response to the stress of going through a divorce, and that's environmental influence, may put him or her at a greater risk for developing depression than someone else who does not have such influences. These are some factors that causes depression. Number one is biological factors. The underlying causes of depression are not well understood, although there are lots of clues suggesting that various systems in the brain may cause depression or be affected by it. For example, major depression is characterized by excessive sleep. So it is very likely that the brainstem, which controls sleep, plays a role in depression. Similarly, abnormalities in the cerebral cortex, which controls thinking, probably have to do with the inability to concentrate and negative thoughts that can be characteristic of depression. Number two, strokes and depression. In some cases, a stroke may cause depression. Strokes that cause depression are more likely to occur in the left frontal lobe of the brain, but they can be found elsewhere. One study of older adults found that damage to specific areas of the brain were more likely to be found in people with major depression than in healthy individuals or patients with dementia. Dementia is a progressive decline in the ability to think and reason. These small subcortical strokes are the type found in individuals with long-standing high blood pressure, diabetes, or other medical illnesses that affect blood vessels in the brain, heart, and other organs. Number three, genetic factors. Individuals with a family history of depression have a greater risk of becoming depressed than the general population. Some researchers believe that a single depression gene exists, but there is mounting evidence to suggest that several genes may be responsible for causing depression. Number four, social and environmental factors. Social and environmental factors also may cause depression, but there are many conflicting studies concerning this issue. For example, some studies suggest that adverse life events such as divorce, serious illness, or multiple episodes of misfortune may cause depression. Other studies have found that no such relationship exists. The phases of depression. Depression often looks different in men and women, and in young people and older adults. An awareness of these differences helps ensure that the problem is recognized and treated. Depression in teens. While some depressed teens appear sad, others do not. In fact, irritability rather than depression is frequently the predominant symptom in depressed adolescents and teens. A depressed teenager may be hostile, grumpy, or easily loses his temper. Unexplained aches and pains are also common symptoms of depression in young people. Depression in older adults. The difficult changes that many older adults face, such as bereavement, loss of independence, and health problems, can lead to depression, especially in those without a strong support system. However, depression is not a normal part of aging. Older adults tend to complain more about the physical rather than the emotional signs and symptoms of depression, and so the problem often goes unrecognized. Depression in older adults is associated with poor health, a high mortality rate, and an increased risk of suicide, so diagnosis and treatment are extremely important. Depression in men. Depression is a loaded word in our culture. Many associate it, however wrongly, with a sign of weakness and excessive emotion. This is especially true with men. Depressed men are less likely than women to acknowledge feelings of self-loathing and hopelessness. Instead, they tend to complain about fatigue, irritability, sleep problems, and loss of interest in work and hobbies. Other signs and symptoms of depression in men include anger, aggression,